as I unmute the microphone.
Perfect.
Hey everybody,
Hello.
how's it going? As you can tell, we're extremely prepared. My name is Matt, this is HB, and this is Mark. How did you guys think the new update went?
I hated it.
I'm pretty happy with how it went. How about you?
Yeah, it was good. Can't think about what to say about it. I think the nice thing is that this is the first update where it's new stuff that we're working on.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Which is great, and
No, it was fun. It was for me. It was a lot of fun. We had like the new game mode, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
That was really fun to have. For having the different, I know it's a small thing, but I particularly think that having, for instance, the different damage states in the game brings a lot to the game.
Yeah.
Visual wise, and also gameplay. It's different now, having feedback that what you're doing is actually working and things like that. So I was pretty happy.
Well, I think one of the things that's nice from that is that I feel like we're able to like experiment more again. It's brought back. So in like the early access days, or not early access days, in the pre-early access days, there was this real like spirit of like experimentation, where literally the game would change every 2 weeks, and that's not even like an understatement. It would be like
exactly like that.
All the rules are different after 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks, all the rules are different again. And like I'm hoping this is gonna bring back some of that spirit, so that we don't feel so locked in. We're not like shackled to the slow pacing of like early access development, which sometimes when you have a player base that is larger, that's more active, it's more difficult to change things, because you're not talking to just a couple of guys on like Discord. You're talking to those people on Discord, and then you're also talking to like the other 75% or the 80% of people that never even go on Discord, right? And they will be like, "What the hell did you just change in the game?" Right? Another thing that's kind of
always on those very nice and very calm way.
It's very different too now. The way that we like develop the game, it's not very different, but some things have changed, and we're starting to notice it a lot. We noticed it definitely on the Fair Night Post update, and we noticed in this last cycle is that because we're sticking more to these dates and these milestones where we're planning a bit more ahead, and we're saying, hey, look, we're going to be launching this on this date and that on that date, it's become like more the development process is more complicated now, because we can't just sort of do things at the last minute and hope that everything's going to work out, because it won't, and things will catch on fire at the last minute. So we're sort of adjusting to this now, to plan a bit more ahead, and to not sort of like have things shifting during the last week before we launch an update, right? So it's definitely changed the way that we've been doing things slightly, and we kind of, without actually officially locking this down, we've kind of naturally moved from the 2-week development cycle to like a 3 to 4 week development cycle, and like
for the record too, like when we used to change stuff, it wasn't like a big deal. It didn't impact a lot. Now we change things,
so many people.
Impacts everything. Even just like making a map is 10 times harder than it used to be. So like, whereas making a map before, we were just like, well, let's blow it up. Who cares?
Well, I think before it was like there was a very tight loop between us and the smaller number of people that were playing the game. Like there would be like 200 people, or I guess like a couple hundred people playing on the weekends on a single server, maybe like one or at most like 2 servers on the weekend, and we would be very close. It was a very tight community, a very tight group of players that if something screwed up, we just hop on Discord, guys, sorry, something screwed up, and everyone would be like, all right, that's fine. Now something screws up, it's like you hear it on all these different channels, and it's like, oh, jeez. Now we gotta figure out how we're gonna fix this. how we're going to get the messaging out, and the messaging is something that we're still working on, because we're so used to talking to that small group that now if something affects everyone, just getting that message out to more than that small group is something that's really important, right? Because again, not everyone is going to be there on the Discord, right? So yeah, I don't know, just random thoughts, completely random thoughts about the last iteration.
I mean, it's for me, I think the biggest thing, like the thing that wowed me the most was the damage states, because I've been complaining about not knowing what's going on when you hit something for a really long time, because you know, if you haven't noticed, stuff in our game can be pretty resilient. So like, I think those damage states bring a lot of
I agree.
And as far as the I think the war games thing is really exciting for me personally, just because, like you said, it goes back to the spirit of just like developing kind of guerrilla style a little bit.
Yeah.
Being able to throw in things, just like, I wonder how this will go. Well, no, this will react, or people will react to this.
And to that point, even if we had we changed the way we did the wars, like the special wars, sorry, the weekly war games, in a way that we open it up one day that was not exactly how we were planning to do, but we changed that to be like very specific times. That also is consistent with this idea that with these wars, with these games, we can have more freedom and we can experiment a little bit more to fit what we need.
Right.
All right, well, let's move on. We're gonna start with some community highlights, I think, and a birthday face.
Skype. Cool. Guess
Yeah. So community highlights this week. Past 2 weeks. Actually, I put 2 completely different pieces of art there. One for Turboslav, which is a long time contributor.
It was exciting to see something new from.
He was kind of like missing for a while, and then suddenly there you go.
Just came out of nowhere.
Exactly, and it's just fantastic. The one to the left, and the one to the right for somebody completely new, at least to this to making art, which is Phantom RU or Phantom Russia. I don't know what it stands for, and it was nice to see that this community highlights. If you guys go check it out. Did we post it already?
No, it's gonna go live after this.
So the community highlights number 29 is gonna be go live right after the dev stream, and there's a lot of new content. There's a lot of new artists, and some artists had to be featured several times actually because they made a lot of things. So these are only like 2 examples of some pretty cool stuff that is there. It's pretty well done as well.
That landing APC on the left is I'm picturing it. That's like a vehicle skin that you can like earn in the game.
In a loot box microtransaction.
Like your disgust.
Let's not bring this into the mix because I want to go off for like an hour about it. And we're not.
No, it's really cool. I was really happy to see that again. It's good to see that the quality of art once again.
Yeah.
It elevates everybody, elevates all the other artists as well. This is a really cool one. I know it's something that actually Matt particularly wanted me to include, but it would be included nonetheless because it's goddamn fantastic. This is a new map. It's Conrad. It's in the process of just creating a map. Fan map. Yeah. Like just he took a piece of the overworld map that I generated for the campaign. He looked at the features of the top left corner that I did just as a temp thing because we're still deciding on exactly what's going to be. I don't want to spoil anything, but he took that and decided to elaborate what would a map look like in that region. And this is really cool, by the way.
And I think specifically it looks like a city map.
Yeah, it looks like an urban map.
I didn't read all the details, but to me it looks like an urban map.
Okay, so if you want to read all the details, actually it's still work in progress, by the way, and he's still working on it. He or she, I'm pretty sure it's he. He's in the chat right now, so he can correct me if I'm wrong. But there in the community highlights, you can see more of the details of the things that he was thinking. Even he even drew some of the buildings that would be inside.
Yeah,
as a
I
separate
think
piece of
I think
note.
you can actually see the red little like squares. I'm pretty sure are buildings.
Yeah,
They can
and,
correct me in chat if I'm wrong, but
and you can see as well. I posted like another of the images that he created is in which you can see the districts, and there are like differences between them. It's a really cool concept. It's a really neat idea. We had people before concepting weapons and skins and even vehicles a lot. But
no,
it's the first time
it's not the first time we've seen a map. But a lot of the other maps were just like, you know, here's a cool way to like expand Deadlands back when it was only there was only one map. Or
But this is the first time.
This is the first time that
But
I
it's a
think,
whole new map, right?
and I think it's also the first one that comes closest to what our maps look like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a totally different idea, which is like an urban space.
I think people have been talking about like the urban map for a long time, like having like a Stalingrad style of map where it's just the whole thing is like a city.
And I think this is the approach that would be very close to how I would want to approach it anyway, where there are sort of like outskirts, like outposts,
Mm-hmm.
and then it all kind of converges on the center area. And I really like the idea of a map that is mostly like urban.
That will be really brutal if you can fire your field artillery and howitzers onto that like island.
Yeah, the island would be a death trap.
It's a pretty. I particularly like this one because first of all he included the railroad. You see those there?
Right.
That on the bottom right corner. These are like train tracks, and this is an idea that we've been like spitballing for a while now.
This would be like the terminal station now.
Something like that, and it's really nice. I was looking through the community Discord channel, and he was actually explaining on how he decided and like which cities he got as reference, and so he does a lot of things that we do as well. We look at cities, we look at
so like one of the things that's exciting for me, I don't know how many other people are excited about it, but for the map that I'm currently working on, I'm actually documenting the whole process, not in video, just in like screenshots, and I'm gonna write like an article explaining how we design the map from just the very conception through the whole process, so that you guys get a sense of it. And I'll tell you, I never draw anything this detailed. You should see the whiteboard drawings that I do. They're not this detailed.
Maybe the first version.
Yeah, the very first. So one of the first things we do is we do a bunch of thumbnails. So they're really tight, tiny little drawings that are like really rough.
And this one is also pretty cool. This is a new. There was this wave. I don't know what happened in this particularly 2 weeks. Maybe it's the amount of people that are joining the game and clans wanted to grab them for their own clans and things like that. But we had an influx of new posters, clan posters. I picked this one from Pollock because of the style. This is completely made by him. Not based on any particular. Because we see a lot of posters there. They take like a World War II or even World War I image and post something on top of it, like a logo or so. This one is completely of his own mind, and it's just look at this art. It's really goddamn good. Like it's really well done.
I was just gonna say it looks almost like it is a video game. Like,
right?
It kind of looks, like the what's the game? The Long Dark is what it reminds me of in terms of like the look of the.
Oh yeah.
More of like the heavily like stylized.
Yeah, very polygonal, but like you can see the hard edges.
Yeah.
I particularly like this. There was a lot of propaganda posters that they were created, but this one jumped up to me. He says it's still a work in progress. I think the art itself is done. Maybe he's working on the graphic design, of the ancillary elements of the poster, but it's damn good. And there are other posters that are also pretty spectacular. There's a bunch of them. You guys check it out. Like after the dev stream, we're gonna post it. It's nice. And the last thing about the community highlights, of course, is something that the community also created, similar in a way to those events. They're doing boot camps now. Yeah. It's an idea that has been with the community for a while now. A lot of players try to get this rolling. Some of them succeeded to a certain extent, some of them didn't succeed. These ones, I think they had already 3 or 4 sessions of the boot camp.
And they're like really well organized.
Extremely well organized.
They're really well organized. I hopped into one of the sessions on the weekend just to see how it was implemented, and it was really cool. It was really fun.
No, it's very nice, very well done.
Yeah.
If you're a new player and you're just joining us and you want to learn a little bit more about the game and how how other players see the game and how they explain tactics and things like that to other players, it's really interesting.
Well, I think because the game doesn't really have a tutorial. There's various ways you can learn the game. You can watch the tutorial video. You can read like a tutorial document. You can just go in there and try to figure it out yourself. This is just another like avenue that's a bit more like engaging because you're actually in there with players. You know, it's a little bit of like a role playing.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of it in my opinion.
And I think it's sort of a fun. I would say if you're in a rush to like learn the game, then maybe it's not the best. But if you want to learn the game in a fun way, right, where you're interacting with players,
you're
really
playing
cool.
the game to learn
You're
the
playing
game.
the game.
And not only that, you're meeting people that you spend time with. If you are in the game afterwards, you're gonna be interacting with those people, the same people that you are. It's just like going to, I don't know, class. You meet these people in the beginning, then you're gonna keep playing with them eventually. It's
really
nice.
cool concept actually.
Yeah.
It's really
I like it a lot because like the game itself relies on people working together and interacting with people. Like I think that's the most exciting part of the game. So to have something like this, I think is just awesome. Like I think it's the best way to learn. Just because you'll get a real sense of the game, because there's a lot of people who only play for a couple hours. They come in and they don't get it. But I think if you were to do this, you would be like, really quickly you would understand what the game's about.
Cool. Guess we'll move on to some community suggestions.
Yep.
This first one here is firing smoke grenades from a grenade launcher and having that help out with the amphibious assaults. I think that's something in terms of firing a smoke grenade or other grenades. That's something we're going to look into. I think that it was talked about at the beginning, but we want to see how the whole firing a grenade at long range would work before we start sticking other types of grenade on it. So it'd be good to hear your feedback on this one actually. If you guys see any corner cases where it might be too cheap, it might not be fair. It'd be great to kind of hear about that because it's really not. I mean, it's not simple, but it's not that hard for us to implement something like this, right? Like the system is there. We just kind of have to wire up support for.
How much is the grenade launcher used in the battle right now?
It's used a lot. Yeah.
The couple times I played for quite some time, I see it.
I haven't seen it in a while. The last times I was playing, so I was like a little bit.
It's I see it constantly used. Yeah, it's a big. It's actually, which is great because it didn't necessarily seem like something that might be like that, right? Another thing is, so this one is
hard to read.
So I'll just kind of explain this one. It's interesting because it's explaining how the outfit system could be like integrated into the game, and it's not necessarily how we might be implementing it, but it's an interest. I wanted to bring it up because it's something we've at least thought about, right? And the idea here is that you actually like earn the outfits by doing a certain number of things. So like if you want to be a medic, if you revive a certain number of players and you heal a certain number of players, then you can requisition the medic outfit, right? This is not how we thought to implement it, but
it's an interesting way.
I think that's something that's like, it's almost something that
it's like earning your stripes. In a weird way.
We want to do it, except there's a contention between this and like sort of the like communal production of things in the game, right? There's like a contention between those two aspects of the game.
So what happens when you die? Somebody can steal your uniform, and then people are gonna have that idea of your possession that you work for.
That's another thing. It brings back the idea of like possession but it's one of those things where it's like it's a trade-off, because just kind of thinking about it on its own, it would be cool. Like you get to earn it, and there's like a progression, and there's like, oh, this thing that makes me, as a player retention thing, is definitely good, right? It's kind of funny because sometimes we say no to these player retention things, and sometimes it kind of like could be negative. Not so much a negative, but it's sort of like an easy way to get the player retention.
Yeah.
But then it's like, it's one of those things where you got to think long and hard about to see whether or not that actually fits into the philosophy of the game, right? So I thought it was an interesting one to kind of have like a kind of think about, right?
It is an interesting
It's
way,
almost
at least, yeah.
It's almost like a gray area thing where it's like it's good but it's bad.
Oh, it could be potentially. We could also even the problems we can always spin it to our favor. Maybe part of it is that when you scavenge somebody that you killed to get a uniform, maybe you don't get the full uniform, you get only the pants or something like that, because the rest is to destroy because of the way you killed the person or something like that, whatever. And when you are requisitioning, you have certain amount of tickets or whatever, because like you can requisition a certain number of times, and you know that you could potentially be giving the enemy tools to trick somebody, or it's the same thing. You're making weapons for the enemy in a way. If you go to the front line with 10,000 rifle clips and you die, now you supply that to the enemy.
Yeah.
So we can always work, but it's an interesting concept. Because it's not the way I thought about it.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one. This one's interesting. It's a map suggestion, and it's a suggestion of putting a fort on an island in a map, and it being like a town hall. But you also kind of get to control these like super weapons on that island that can help you out with that map, right? So I thought it was kind of cool. It's a bit related to some of the stuff that we're going to talk about.
Is this like a segue?
A little bit, yeah. So I thought I would kind of want to highlight this because it is somewhat related to some of the stuff we're going to talk about on the new map. But it's a cool idea. I think the whole concept of like having map specific features like this is something that we're going to play around with in the future, right? So it's not like, so like you might hop into one map and there being something like a world structure or something as an example that's only on that map, right? I think something like that could really help out, at least especially at this stage when we have so many maps. It could really help with like bringing something fresh, right? And making it interesting. So
I mean, when we design the maps in the first place, we always think of them with a particular theme in mind anyway. So it only further, to me, helps to
if we have another element,
emphasize the theme. So
cool. I guess that's it for the community suggestions. Gonna just
thank you for all the suggestions. Remember that because we're talking doesn't mean we're gonna implement them, but like it does help us even figure out things for the future. So keep them coming.
I always see it as like it's important. The conversation is important because it gets people to be on the same page. It gets people to understand what we're trying to do and how we think about things. It's just part of like the communication process. Not everyone is gonna agree with our thoughts. But I think actually knowing our thoughts and then not like agreeing with it is better than not knowing what the hell we're even thinking, right? Which is always probably the worst thing.
And I think the closer that we get to being on the same page, the better the suggestions are getting anyway.
Yeah.
So like they're more in line with the way that we sort of like do things.
So we're gonna talk a little bit about the next update, even though the last one just tell it on Thursday.
Because that's right? The pace that we go for.
That's how we do things.
Conquest update.
Conquest update.
Now, what a sounding name.
Right. We're gonna be working on this cool update in November, hopefully coming in November, and it's gonna have some cool features. I'm gonna quickly walk through just at a high level about one of these features, and then we're gonna talk about the map, which is one of the main features of this upcoming update. So I guess first of all, there is Return of World Conquest mode. So
yes!
everyone can stop yelling at us now.
We've just been trying to figure it out, okay?
Yeah, it's a hard mode. It's
I think it's like the hardest thing that we've worked on.
Yeah,
so
it's
Far North Coast is a close second, but this was.
Well, World Conquest is very stressful. It's a very stressful feature to work on and to operate and like deploy and all that stuff. So it's sort of like we wanted to make sure that we had the amount of time we needed to work on it, and we have a whole cycle to spend on it.
Yeah.
And it not just being like, hey, we're gonna tack it onto this other thing that's already kind of like falling apart.
And we don't want to rush it to it in a way that like we end up shipping something that we are not happy or that is too broken, because let's be honest, bugs are going to exist with student pre-alpha, but we don't want it to be unplayable or anything like that, or have something that completely unbalances the whole mode.
Yeah, I think even when we first launched this mode, I wouldn't be comfortable launching it now in that state, because there's a lot of funky things going on, like people's vehicles getting stuck in the sky when they transferred over to like when they went from one. So I guess first of all, for those of you who don't even know what this is, because we're just kind of talking about it like everyone knows World Conquest mode, right? So what World Conquest mode is it allows us to have more than one map involved in a war in a way that all the maps are connected to each other. So you can drive between them, you can walk between them, you can take a tank basically and drive it from like one map through all the way to the map on the other side of the world, right?
Yeah, so for instance, if you are looking at the campaign map, like the campaign screen, the one where you choose, you would see that in this case, we're going for whatever maps that we have there, they are connected to each other, they are played at the same time, and in order for you to win, you have to conquer the whole world.
The whole world. So rather than conquering all the towns in one map, you have to conquer every town at the same time in all the maps. And
because of that, you can walk from one map to another.
And you can do lots of things like if you can completely capture all the towns in the zone, and then that in one map, and that map is basically, it'll be like under your control, but there's nothing stopping the enemy from sending in like a raiding party to go and try to recapture one of those towns, right? So really it's like you can really get hundreds of players all in the same war, right? And I think at the time we did get it up to like, I think around 300, or if not, it was close, players all in the same war, at the same time. And there was some really cool, it was really, it was a little like clunky, and there were issues, and at the time there was like I guess there was a lot of skill gaps too. Yeah. Just a whole bunch of issues, but there was all this really cool stuff that we saw happening. Like people would be forming these like raiding parties and sending them off into the other map and trying to like retake it. There would be a lot more like there would be like covert ops type missions like behind enemy lines. There's a really lot of cool things, and when the war was won, it really felt like a monumental thing, especially that first one. I will never forget the first World Conquest, because that went on for like a couple of days, and when it was finally won, like everyone went on to like the Discord, and it was like a big deal. It was like, oh my god, like the war was won, and it was like a crazy deal, and it was really it was really fun, and it was really cool. We're figuring out how to bring that back. We're working on it now, and we hope that this time it's gonna be here to stay.
Yeah,
right?
Hopefully,
So
no
that's
promises, but
is there anything in particular that you want to talk about that's like improving, or should we leave that for a later time?
I think we're just gonna leave it there for now, because some things are kind of in flux.
Well, also all the work that we are doing, we're still working on queues and things like that. They're all the backbone to have World Conquest.
So I think if there is one thing that I can talk about is that we're reworking some of the technicals. So much like the server queues, rather than this World Conquest thing being held together by a bunch of hacks, we're trying to do things more the proper way at the back end. So it's not such a, first of all, it's not such a pain to like operate, right?
Yeah, it was very hard for us, and doing that with more maps now would be.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things that we need to fix, is making it not so difficult to operate so that we can maintain it much better, and we can actually add features in, versus it kind of hardly even working and it's falling apart, and we're constantly having to check on things and making sure that everything's working together. Improving the operation is probably a huge priority, which means that when we first roll this out again, hopefully there'll be a couple of improvements on the user side, but there might not necessarily be it's not going to necessarily be a huge leap from what we had before previously. A lot of the improvements are going to be at the back end, right?
Which allows us to actually run this again.
Which is the proper thing to do, because it's easy to come up with all these flashy features and say, hey, it's going to have this and that, and then it's not working that well at the back end. It's much better to get the fundamentals right and then move forward with it, right? So, which is something we don't always do, but we're trying to do that more often, right? So,
anyway,
new map is Westgate, and we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. And it's going to have a cool feature we've never seen before in a map, which is kind of nice, right? And there's going to be a new vehicle to be revealed. It's very anticlimactic. Most of this is just like, we're doing stuff. Nothing to show. We're doing new thingies. And vehicle system improvement. So we're also going to be spending some time this iteration in trying to consolidate and to try to polish some of the quirks in the vehicle system. It's been a constant work in progress, but vehicle system has certainly, I guess we've been developing new vehicles fast, and we want to go back and try to, so there's certain features that exist on some vehicles but don't exist on the other ones, right? So it's not like a unified system. I think that's one of the big things that we're gonna try to work on. Like, as an example, I think some of them have trails, some of them don't. Some of them have the roll physics, some of them don't. Some of them you can kind of climb on top of, and then the other ones you can't really. And it's just mishmash of non-unified feature sets, right? And that's just on the gameplay side. You don't want to know about the technical side, where it's also a whole bunch of special cases, right? So big part of the effort is to try to take everything and try to unify it so that vehicles will behave more similar to each other, and then try to fix some of the, or at least try to improve some of the quirks. Hopefully we'll take a look at players being run over by vehicles and try to figure out if there's something we can do to make that better. It's a very complicated, it's a very complicated feature. And besides that, we're going to be taking a look at the login flow, and this is related to the faction queues, right? So a lot of people have been asking about this, and what we've done with the server queues last time was sort of laying the groundwork to add in the faction queues. And a part of that work that we're going to have to do now is take the whole flow of logging into the game, which previously was you go into the server and then you have to choose a side. And if your side's full, you're stuck there, and then if you're AFK for too long, then they'll boot you out, and then it's really frustrating because then you have to go back to the queue, and it's just all this it's because that login system happens once you've logged into the server almost, then our hands are tied in a lot of ways, and that's why we haven't been able to do stuff like the faction queues. But the thing is, moving that part of moving that flow out to before you connect to the server is actually like very hard. It sounds easy on paper, like, oh, just take that screen and
put it on the top.
Yeah, just to put it to the outside. But it's hard because, like, without getting too far into like the technicals, it's like you don't know a lot until you're actually on the server, right? So we have to like make sure that we can get that information out to the outside. And anyways, long story short, we're gonna revamp that so we can get faction queues working. Hopefully soon, and then we'll fix some of those issues, like you being stuck on that screen and not being able to like join your side. And then other neat stuff, the catch-all for other
neat stuff.
My typical and more stuff, right? So
let's go to the
let's talk about the map. And do you want to take the reins in this one, Matt? Or
I can start. I mean, like, here's a piece of concept art that Julian did. I think we showed this once.
We gave it to the community stream to show this one.
Yeah. Right. So
the map is
called Westgate.
Yeah.
So
and where is this map?
This is in the
on the east side.
It's like in the east. It's on the southwest, so it's to the west of Upper Heartlands, and it is, you know, parts of the map are really similar to Upper Heartlands actually, but it's unlike, so Upper Heartlands is kind of like horizontal. This map is much more vertical, so it actually goes down south further, and we get to something that you guys have talked about for like a really long time, called the Bulwark. So that is this giant wall. It was on a map that we showed a really long time ago, but this isn't the part where the colonials busted through. This is like totally intact. So I think that's kind of the interesting part. Is this is a fortress on a map called Westgate. It looks over the Western Ocean at the border where the Bulwark is. So it should be pretty interesting. The southern part of the map is really inspired by like Scottish Highlands. So it's a little different than maybe what we've seen before. You can maybe show the map if you want.
Well,
or some of the concept art.
We've got this. I guess I'll go through these kind of quickly because we've already seen them.
If you do that, people are gonna get pissed.
They can screen cap it and talk about it later. But no, I think because I already showed these on the blog,
okay.
So they can always go on the blog. But there's some new stuff here.
So this is
cool.
the cannon that's on the fortress, which I think in these initial sketches the cannon was just sitting on like some pillar, but there's actually a fortress as well, which you could see in that concept art.
Yeah.
So these are some sketches. This is kind of what the inside of the fortress would look like, because it's like a gate holding basically.
Yeah. So I guess it's a good time we can talk about that fortress.
Yeah. You wanna? You mean
sure,
you're kind of like led the reins on the features, so.
Yeah. So the there's gonna be like a keep at the end of this wall. In this map, it's kind of close to the center of the map, and besides it just being a part of the wall, it's actually going to be a world structure, right? And you can capture it, and it'll act like an outpost that is very heavily armored, and if you capture it first, then you'll basically have a very heavily armored spawn point at the center of the map. So it's something that you can fight for, it's the first time we're sort of doing this map-specific structure type of feature, which we're really excited about. So you can actually walk inside this keep, and you can even have like a gunfight inside, which is kind of neat. It's gonna be pretty big, and
and then I mean, since it functions like an outpost for all intents and purposes, it will be pretty interesting to see how it's used, because it's not a town.
Yeah.
So, which should be made.
It's not a town hall.
Like, it's not a town hall, so it's not necessary. It's just there. So
it's just there at a strategic point in the map. A very strategic point in the map, right?
There's probably a question that's gonna come up. Can you shoot the top gun there?
Right. I don't want to talk about that.
Okay.
That's my answer. So take that question, which is going to be 20 of them, and we're not going to talk about whether or not that cannon is going to fire right now. I think in terms of concepts.
That is really neat.
But even though we just said that, we're just gonna show off.
This highly detailed.
This is like Julian's fault. He's like, let's put these into the slides, and I'm sure no one is gonna ask whether or not you can use them. So,
just because there's a person right beside in the concept there.
Right.
That's a size reference,
But
by the
like
way.
besides, just as a sidebar note, there is the game modifier that we still wanna work on, which is the super weapons one.
Which is something that requires some testing and requires a lot of
Yeah.
work to actually be able to do.
Absolutely.
But it's an interesting.
Yeah.
That's one that I'm particularly very excited about.
I'm very excited about that
Yeah.
one too, right? So just decided to mention it because there's this really cool
A super
Don't worry,
weapon.
you were called out in chat about the wargame modifier.
Oh, okay.
Already,
Oh,
so-
cool.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's Westgate live demo. Hopefully this won't fall apart, Matt.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so Mark's going to just kind of walk through just a very small part of the map. Just a disclaimer: the map is still really early. What you're going to see of the bulwark is actually completely work in progress. It's not even. It's just a placeholder. But what I wanted to do is kind of give you guys a sense of the scale of the wall and how that's going to kind of look. It's going to look really different once it's all done.
Yeah.
But just to give a sense, and we'll open the map so you guys can see the actual.
Yeah. And like
layout.
Matt just said, I want to be super clear that the wall is like a gray box asset,
Yeah.
and that's a term we use to basically say that it's just meant to be a stand-in without any of like the visuals, so that we get a sense of the space and the scale. The real assets are still being worked on.
It's a boxing thing.
Yeah, so like a lot of the time, when you build maps, when you build stuff in a video game, you always just do a stand-in version first. Hopefully, if you're lucky, and that will allow you to make sure that it works. Make sure that the construction works, so that by the time it's finished, you don't have this finished thing that you can't use, because that's the worst.
Right.
So I'm going to switch over and
Sure. Yeah.
so if you want to open the map real quick, this seems to be lagging a bit on the actual monitor.
Oh, is it okay?
I'm just going to refresh it real quick.
Bring it to the right instead of the left because that's where the camera is.
Just give this a sec. You should be okay.
Am I going the right direction?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little laggy on
There you go.
the actual capture for some reason.
So I'll try to zoom out of it. And you can
Yeah,
tell
keep
me.
zooming, keep zooming, keep
There you
zooming.
go.
Bring it to the right.
Okay.
So just to talk a little bit about the layout of the map, there's something you're going to notice like almost right away, and that's like it's almost symmetrical, which
It's a
It's
very
something-
important decision.
which is something
Very
that
intentional too.
that
Yeah.
like, and the other thing I want to say is like don't freak out about that island, because I know like a lot of people are probably going to be really like nervous about it, but we're I think like what's really interesting about this map is that it is pretty much symmetrical. We specifically designed this map after some back and forth. Actually, we didn't originally come to the idea of like a symmetrical map, but as it started to form, we looked at it and we were like, we could make this like a really good
So-
symmetrical map.
So I think this has been like one of the maps where we've kind of spent more time at the beginning in figuring out exactly kind of trying to visualize the kind of strategies happening and trying to walk them through and like devoting, I guess, a bit more than usual time into that. And I mean, so that was really cool. And
Yeah.
and we really wanted to provide multiple options.
Mhm.
I think we were really shooting to have at least like 3 viable options at the start,
Mhm.
and we're hoping through the testing process we can change things around to make sure that that's kind of happening. And we're kind of happy that we have this done at an earlier stage, so hopefully we can test sooner rather than later, so we can get back some feedback.
Yeah.
And yeah, is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah,
about
so there's a
that?
couple things that are worth mentioning. Like if you look at the gray line in the center of the map on the right, that is the bulwark. You can't pass it. You can't walk. There's not a single gap across the whole thing except where the roads are. So there are 2 gates. Those are the only places you can go through. So control of the wall is going to be pretty like almost like that's what's going to happen. Like the wall's going to be controlled.
It's going to be like End of the Shore except worse.
Yeah. So one of the big things is like this is not only is this like a very land focused map, it's also still a partially water focused map because you're going to want to use the water to get around the wall.
All the areas.
You're going to want to take that island to have a different place to hold up away from the wall. Because the wall is going to be a big obstacle. Sorry. So I apologize for the lag. It's the capture card. It's actually not the laptop that we're using to run this. So sorry. I don't know why that's happening. It's technology. So Mark's just going to kind of run up here to where the bulwark is.
Man, this map is big.
Yeah, it's about the size of Weathered Expanse, actually.
Oh.
If you want to.
Yeah,
So this is just to give you a sense of the scale. So this is what a gray box looks like, in case you've ever.
There's a reason why it's called gray box.
Yeah.
It's literally gray. Sometimes in like World of Warcraft, their gray boxes are actually blue.
And I do my gray boxing in orange.
So the roof is probably not going to pop off because it's just a static asset. But this gives you a sense of the size.
So this is the keep, and you'll be able to claim the keep and spawn there, right? And that's located somewhere roughly at the center of the map.
Yeah, it's close to the center.
Yeah.
It should be a pretty good distance from each of the towns.
Where you go?
Just kind of walking around. I think the collisions map weren't set up in the gray box.
Okay. So
but we had it in the previous.
On the previous version, okay.
The previous version where we were able to walk into the keep and so unfortunately we won't be able to show that part off, but hopefully maybe in like the dev blog or something we'll.
Why is there a gap to the right of the keep? That was a question that just came up.
Right. No, it's a great question. That's a great question.
And it's not there unintentionally.
Yeah. It's an intentional thing. There is some we're taking a look at the gameplay, and we wanted to provide some other options besides just going through that narrow gates here, right?
Yeah.
So we're still going to be experimenting because we don't even know if this is going to be like enough. Maybe we'll need more space to get through. It may be too narrow. So we're still working on it.
One of the general ideas though is like you should be able to stop someone from rebuilding. So there should be ways to get through. There should be ways to get around. There should be ways to counter. And someone said like that defeats the purpose of the wall. Yeah, but also people would be manning this keep. Like no one would get through this area.
No, that was one of the main reasons, Matt, is that if someone is trying to rebuild it on the other side and you couldn't get to the other side to like defend, it would just be shot down as soon as you spawned the build ghost, right? So we got to make sure that there's reasonable ways to claim the other side first before you rebuild the keep, right?
Mm-hmm. And someone just saying, man, that wall's not ready. I mean, the wall is literally this is a stand-in.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely not. This is an early look at the level. This might be the earliest we've ever shown a level. Maybe Weathered Expanse we showed pretty early.
Yeah.
But even then we had a finished wall at that point for that map. So this is a pretty early look, but it's several weeks out still. So
I think something too to kind of like add to that is that we're gonna move towards showing things off when they're a bit more raw, so we can get feedback at an earlier stage rather than like the final week. And we show this off and like we get it out there, and then people will be like, well, this is broken because you didn't think about this thing, right? And at that point we got a couple of days to try to hack up a fix, but the earlier we can get some real evaluation on the gameplay, and being able to have like a whole like 2 weeks or something of that sort to like make the corrections, things won't feel as like hacked up once they're shipped, right? And that's something you're going to see us doing much more often, maybe even with some of the vehicles. I mean, something that we're thinking about doing is to make some of the vehicles in a gray box state, and hopefully trying to get some like eyes on that, right? And and seeing, you know, like I think a lot of issues with the barge and the landing APC map would have been sorted out at an earlier stage if we did do like a gray box and we didn't just jump straight to like, here's the finished landing APC. Now it's broken because of the XYZ, right? I think that like Faranac Coast was a bit of like a wake up call for us to like test this stuff as early as possible. Don't wait till we have the final barge and then everybody hops on it and then, you know, everything completely falls apart, right? So
yeah, I think Faranac Coast was the peak of our you know, pre-alpha, early like guerrilla style, because it doesn't. It only works when the things are not complicated. As soon as things get complicated,
we don't have this many people all playing the game. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So I personally, I also really like something I've said from the very beginning when we started this project really early was I like to show people how games are actually made, as well, as opposed to just like, here's like the thing. What do you guys think? Like I like to show this is actually the process. And you know, our map process actually is a little different than probably a lot of other companies as well, because we had the game in a playable state for so long. So a lot of the stuff is just there for the maps to get made. But if this game was like a arena shooter or something, all the maps would be gray boxed and stuff too at this stage.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because we know what some things work and some things don't. So anyway,
that's it. Do you want to switch away from this, Matt?
Yeah.
Cool.
So we're gonna do Q&A now, and so you guys, we don't have too much time, but start throwing your questions in chat. We'll start asking questions. One thing I just want to say is we're not calling this current build pre-alpha. We did have a build that was playable that was pre-alpha before we launched into early access.
This is pre-alpha for a whole year before we launched into early access. So. Pushyasha asks truck rework. They look so ugly compared to the rest of the vehicles.
The trucks.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting point, because the trucks were actually first of all, it was the first vehicle made, right? So that's one thing. And secondly, a part of that was, I think we did maybe like a quick pass on it afterwards, but the initial version at least was largely taken from a previous project, and I think we sort of tweaked it a bit, and then we threw it in here as part of like the vehicle prototype, and it's the oldest vehicle in the game, right? It's the one that we haven't, like, it was using the oldest process, right, of making vehicles, and where something like the Warden Half Track is using the newest process, right?
Yeah.
So as you can see, vehicles have kind of, so what happens when you run a live game for like a whole year is that like things slowly get better, right? And we're also learning how to make things better constantly, right? So hopefully like things will look better in a year from now too. But that's the reason, I guess. Was that the question?
The question is, is there going to be any rework on the truck?
Oh, is there going to be any rework?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is that even on our radar?
Right. I think we really want to do that, right? I think we really want to do that, and I can't imagine a future where we don't redo it at some point. I guess I'll leave it at that, yeah. Because I think, you know, having them faction specific is one thing. I think there's also, maybe we want to take a look at some of the functionality too, right?
Yeah.
I saw Bear ask, with the keep being introduced, are you planning on putting in new neutral spawn structure to replace town halls or supplement them? I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but the keep does work like is a place to spawn at.
So I guess
maybe he's asking for more other maps.
Yeah.
Like having also things like that on other maps.
Yeah. Well, there's another question also saying that, like, asking if other maps are going to get kind of like a rework treatment with new features.
Like retrofitted.
We don't have specific plans as of yet for that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to maybe.
If it's something that we see that is going to complement the playstyle of that particular map, there's nothing against the fact that we could potentially go back and revisit a map and do something else. But if it's something that we don't think improves, there is no reason to do it.
Absolutely, it has to work with the theme of the map.
Like a fortress, or like a fort, like Westgate. Westgate is also the name of the fortress. Is not going to work in every map because every map doesn't have a place for a fortress. Does that make sense? But you know.
Well, I think another thing too is to see how it plays out on this map, right? Like,
yeah, it's true too.
Like how well is, maybe it doesn't even matter. Maybe everyone's just gonna be like, whatever. I'm just gonna make like an outpost. This thing is useless, right?
Yeah.
Which could happen, right? Like that's we've definitely seen things like that happen in the past where we tried to build things for a specific reason and then everyone just kind of like bypasses it and
say
like,
screw it.
Never mind. Like this is just not.
It's a waste of time.
It's a waste of time. I'd rather just go forward and make like barracks or something. So it's very. I think we'll see. I think it'll be. I kind of personally feel like it'd be cool if there were more things like this in the other map. Maybe not necessarily even. Maybe not even really like outposts. Maybe there's just other things that are unique to the map, like other structures that function like that don't function like an outpost, right? That function like something else, but it could give you some sort of like an advantage, right?
I do think things like this, things like I think Weather Expanse is a good example of that. You know, there are these walls all over the place. You know, there are certain things that really help tie a map together like that, and I think Westgate's going to be one of them. Where you know, having these sort of things in the map that are not necessary to win a map.
Right.
Are really interesting to me personally as the guy who designs the maps. Like, it gives me a lot to work with, and I think like some more of that is good, but also there's a place where there's too much of it and it detracts from the core of the game, which we don't want to do that either. We don't want to go, there's two directions, right?
So something I think that would be really cool, again, this is just like a brainstorming type of thing.
Uh-huh.
It's not planned or anything, but I think something that would be really cool in the future is if World Conquest, in the context of like World Conquest mode, if there were structures in the world that you can claim that give you some sort of like a one-up on the war kind of across the whole world, right? Like, a factory that it only builds this specific type of vehicle is
but it's specific to a certain region of the map as well.
Right, and there's only one.
So there's a reason to actually fight for this map and not
something else. And if you hold that, then like the enemy is gonna want to try to take it from you before you can build whatever it is that thing lets you build, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think stuff like that is really cool. But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential for that stuff. Just because it's getting asked, and I want to kind of bring it up so that there's like a stance on it, especially for newer players. Will you consider using Conrad's map or something similar?
Considering using his map, like as it is.
The question is, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think we have plans to like just take something from the community like that wholesale and just go ahead and make it. So I guess to give a clear answer on that, I think it's no. But I think that we're always gonna our stance on that and our stance on kind of like any suggestions from like the community. Or any piece of art or any of that stuff is that if we see something and we feel like, hey, this is an idea that works towards the goals that we have for this project, right? Then we're going to take a very close look at that, and we're going to say, hey, maybe we can take some of these ideas since we haven't thought of it, and it does actually make the game more like the game that we wanted to build. Mm-hmm. Then it's something that we might take. On the other hand, if we see something and it's kind of like, well, it's kind of just neat as a fan thing, but like it doesn't really work towards the game in a way that we feel the game should be, then we probably would not take a close look at that, right? And that's really the answer, right? So
sounds good. That's why I wanted to ask that question. Crazy Fine Chicken asked a really good question, and I think
this is a hard one. It's not asking hard questions.
Last week you wanted me to only ask hard questions. Once upon a go, you said that you never wanted to create a symmetrical map. Is there any particular reason for the reversal of the policy? So, like, when we were making this map, like, Mark actually had to fight with me about the symmetry, because I didn't want it to be, and originally the map was designed not to be. In the very first, second, third, fourth, and fifth version of it. It was after a lot of deliberation and a lot of talking that we came to the idea of saying sort of why not, since it's not in the game.
And like I think if we ever said that, maybe we messed up and we shouldn't have said that.
We should never say never. I think that's something that's really important. Like, I'm probably the person who said it because I'm really like usually against, for this game in particular, is the symmetry. I probably said we're never going to make a symmetrical map, but
I guess that like, you know, that was said. Maybe we messed up, but I don't think we ever really internally, at least, felt like there had to be a hard and fast rule. Maybe it was just a general like philosophy that we don't try to like make things in perfect balance. But I think that we swung so far in the other direction on Fahrenheit Coast that maybe some of that was like, man, maybe we should just kind of like ease off on this a bit, because Fahrenheit Coast was just completely kind of like out of whack.
I think Fahrenheit Coast is the like pinnacle of asymmetry.
And I think that subconsciously, maybe we kind of like wanted to swing a bit in the other direction. So yeah, I guess that's that was what I was.
We don't have any internal rulings against symmetry.
No,
just something that we avoided because we think that creates better gameplay or more interesting interactions if it's not symmetrical. But it's not something we're against.
Yeah, it's not necessarily like I mean to be honest, Fisherman's Row is symmetrical. We did that on purpose for that map from the very beginning because it was meant to be sort of a training map. It was meant to be used to help people learn, so that it was a little simpler. And then you know, like, you know, something like Deadlands is not perfectly symmetrical, but it's like, you know, in terms of the flow, it's pretty symmetrical. But like, I'm usually the person who fights against it, just because I think when I try to think about the maps not in a single map, but in the whole world. And if the whole world is balanced, that's all I really care about. I'd rather the situations be engaging, because, for instance, D-Day wasn't a symmetrical battle. You know what I mean? Like, these are not things that, like, symmetry is not a thing that happens in war very often.
And to be clear, I don't think the philosophy has changed. I think we're still in the future. We're not going to have a rule to make things symmetrical, so nothing has changed there.
Yeah.
I just don't think that there's a hard and fast rule on that. So.
I'm going to ask one hard question, Mark. You ready for it? It's a criticism almost more than a question, but I'm going to ask it. You ready?
Sounds good.
You good? Put the camera in a better position. I always get shot from somewhere I can't see because the enemy is using a different camera angle to see further. The aiming shooting needs improvement, but overall Foxhole is a good game. But how do you feel about changing the camera or adjusting the mechanics for aiming and shooting? I see this a lot of people say this.
Yeah, I think that's been on the list of things we've heard for a very long time, and probably one of those things where we just haven't touched for a long time, and probably will not touch it for a long time. It's not because it's not because we don't agree with it. I guess it's just like we just have to figure out when would be the appropriate time to take a look at that and to see if there really is a solution or not. I guess that's really all there is to say on that one. There is a lot of things in the game, like there are a lot of things in the game that we hear like a lot about, and like, believe me, like it hurts when we read it all. We're like, we just want to fix it. We just want to make it better. And you guys on the team are constantly coming to like talk to me about these things. Like, Mark, I think we should fix it because everyone is talking about it, and like there's a frustration on everyone's end. Like, I want to fix it. I know you guys want to fix it. But there's just like there's constantly a huge volume of work, and there's constantly this challenge of trying to like pipeline all the work in a way that makes sense on the team. And like, I guess that's a much more complicated answer than you're probably expecting, but I guess that's as close to the truth as I can try to get on that one, right? I think there's a lot of things that we sometimes hear, like, oh, why did you work on faction-specific half-track? Like, why did you make that Warden half-track instead of working on the faction themes?
Yeah, fixing
right? And it's like, I think it's important to understand, and, you know, this is just something that maybe is not clear always.
And that's for every game, not just ours.
And it's for every game. You know, certainly we play games and we complain, oh, why don't you just fix this in like my favorite game, right? But like a lot of times it's like there are different people working on different things on the project, and like it just because we can work on something like faction half tracks, it doesn't mean that time could have went to work on the faction queues.
Yep.
There's very two different systems, and like touching faction queues as one example, it seems so trivial on the outside, right? But I could tell you that if we just move that, everything would fall apart. Like the vote kick system would fall apart, like the queues would fall apart, everything would fall apart.
Even logging, a simple thing as just entering the game would fall completely apart.
Yeah, because there's so much logic that it's on the coding side that's like entrenched, heavily like entrenched code that's been there from the beginning and that has been working for like thousands of players across a whole year, and to suddenly transplant that piece of logic out to someplace else is something that is a serious matter that needs like, you need to block off like 2-3 weeks to even think about doing something like that. And we're working on all these features, it might seem like, well, just don't make the word in half track and just do that one other thing in like 5 seconds. It's like,
we can assure you that the person or the people who are working on the ward and half track have nothing to do with the other feature that you guys want done.
Unless they want me to work on the queue feature, and then you're not gonna have it done.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this as like, oh well, that's an excuse, we're never gonna work on that. It's more just so that like it's easier to understand and to be on the same page about why things are like the way they are. I think another reason is that like we're constantly still figuring out the optimal way of how to get to working on these things, right? It's a learning process too. Like
so when we're talking about
for us as a team, like we think we had things working the right way for the pre-alpha, and then now we went to the early access stage, and those same like techniques of making a game are not going to work in this environment. So we have to almost like reinvent like a lot of the processes that we use and this learning process to figure out how to do things now in a more, so like it took us a whole year to figure out the best way to make the game in pre-alpha, and now we're sort of like in this new phase and we got to figure out the best way to do things now. So it's just a constant, it's a learning process, and we're going to try to be as transparent with you guys as possible, so that hopefully it can help, right?
And
I feel bad for the guy who asked that question because we just suddenly like went and I took the opportunity to be like, this is why things are the way they are. But
it's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to ask that question in particular, is because it is something that's come up, and I think it's really important that like,
talk about all our problems.
We do agree with you. 90% of the problems that you guys have with certain mechanics and features and things in the game that like you're like, this is so frustrating. Odds are we thought about it first, and we know about it,
and we also hate it.
And it's just a matter of, it's going to be a matter of time and patience and process. Because like realistically, when you want to put it in perspective, Foxhole has been in development for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Total, I think.
And
then it's a bit more than that. But
accepting the fact that you guys had the concept earlier, like it's been in computers working.
Right.
So like there's a ways to go, and we'll get there. And I think hopefully by the time it launches, a lot of the stuff that is quirky won't be.
There's a lot of things also, right, that like I think this is a part of trying to get as close to the truth as possible. There's also certain complaints, certain things that just might never change.
It's true, yeah.
Right? It's just like, just in the same way that you think of your favorite game, it's not perfect. There are things that just, because it just was never appropriate, or the team never got around to it, or something, it's a game of picking what we feel like is the best thing, that has the best chance of this being the best game possible. I just said like best, like best, but that is what it is, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry for bringing you on this spiritual journey of talking about how to make games.
I think it's really important though, because we've been making a game in front of people since day 90, I think.
You know what is cool? I'm gonna change the subject for
one
second, right? It's been a whole year we've been doing these streams. I just realized that there were a number. I guess it's not exactly a year, but it's like
It's just about a year.
Right. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Happy 1 year.
Happy 1
Wow.
year. Yeah. Happy 1 year since there were 5 people watching this stuff.
You know, the quality of the stream hasn't gotten better in a year.
No,
but
not much better.
We'll fix that. Hope you guys have a good week.
Thank you for hearing us ramble a little bit.
There is one last thing that Mark wants to talk about, so take it away, Mark.
It's a couple of things. Watch the community stream next Thursday. There's another stream that happens that is run by the community. Happens on the Thursdays on the off weeks that we are not doing these streams.
Always opposite weeks.
And Matt hopefully can post a link to that. Another thing is the War Games number 2 is going to go live at 4 o'clock. So be ready to join in. And I think the modifiers will be PvP, take cover, and high tech, right?
Yeah.
So
and the community highlights will go live as well right away.
Are going to go live too.
Right away.
Cool. All right, that's it. That's all I got to say.
Awesome. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming out. I'm waving
Bye-bye.
with my other hand that isn't on camera. Goodbye.